Good afternoon. Hi. I'm so thrilled to be here. And I'll tell you a little bit about why during the course of my presentation. But first of all, let me just say welcome back to Simmons. We are so happy that you're here. And I will explain also how this opportunity has really changed sort of me and the way I've been thinking about Simmons and Simmons history. So this has been a fortuitous assignment for me. And I'll explain a little bit more about why that is. I am Suzanne Leonard. I am a professor here at Simmons, and I'm going to be leading the discussion today. I wanted to just start out by having Michelle and Marjorie here. As an official position as a reunion organizer.
Committee members.
Okay. Are you getting paid for this?
There's just enough chairs to fit us. It's amazing.
Okay.
If we need any more, I'll bring some. It's the desk, so you have to go to the concierge. So that was in Common Grounds.
Okay.
In class of 74? Oh, I'm gonna miss one. Where's Kylie? I'm gonna bring in a chair.
Okay, great.
So come on in, and there's one here. Well, how many chairs do I need still?
We need two more.
Two more. I'll be right back.
Well, welcome. Our room is even fuller, which is exciting. So as I was saying, I'm going to ask Michelle and Marjorie to talk a little bit about their vision for our time together and how they kind of foresee the conversation going, and then I'll step back in. So Michelle, would you like to start?
Sure.
This we didn't talk about.
No, okay. So when we were volunteers with the committee organizing the reunion, I think one of the things that a number of us felt was missing was our voice. Like, what do we want to hear? What do we want to think about and talk about at the reunion? So I would have to say that Marjorie captured it for me because she suggested talking about changes in the women's movement, changes in our lives over the decades. What have we gained and what is still yet to be done? And of course, some of the gains have been lost. We've seen some amazing turnovers of her. So we kind of advocated for this to happen so that we could get a chance to talk together. And that brings us here. Thank you for coming.
And I will just add to that, not very much, just to say, this is our meeting. So this is really going to be after Suzanne speaks and shows us some slides of what was happening in the day. It's our turn to talk about what happened in our lives and what we would like to see moving forward, not only for us, but for our children. So I will let Suzanne start off, and then we'll see what happens.
So the first slide is going to be just a little bit about me, and then I'm going to allow you, or ask you, I should say, to share a little bit about you.
Oh, Lord, Dan graduated.
Usually I'm not so forthcoming with my age, but I feel like something that, I don't know. 1974 is a special year for me too. So this is my 18th year at Simmons. I've written two monographs. One is about the film Fatal Attraction, and the other is a book called Wife Incorporated, The Business of Marriage in the 21st Century. I'm married to a man named Alan. You can see over there, he's a JetBlue pilot.
Oh.
And that is Annabelle, our 9-year-old daughter here, who was not all that happy about having to dress in 80s clothes. she's a Girl Scout, and they were supposed to do a decades thing, and we'd gone to the 80s party, and so I was like, "You're going to be Cyndi Lauper." Other people were like Abigail Adams. I live in Winthrop, Massachusetts, and I'm actually a member of the Winthrop School Committee. And finally, I am at work at a book right now called The Feminist Guide to Marriage. And so what I thought we would do is, I know we have a room full of people, but because this is your event and your ability to, I want to hear your voices. So there's explaining to Marjorie and Michelle, it's always a good thing when you're instructing to make sure that people get to speak that early in a session so that everybody feels like they too have a voice. Yes.
Sorry, she just said already when I raised my hand. So, businesses, what do you teach?
Oh my God.
And
So
what is your PhD in, just to fill
Sure.
yourself out a little?
Sorry. It's funny, I did all the personal stuff. I figured the academic was a little boring. So I got my PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in English. My dissertation was called Scarlet Women, Unfaithful Women in Feminism, Fiction, and Film. And so I was hired into the English department in 2006. The English department also teaches some film and media studies. So I have really kind of evolved a little bit as a scholar, and now I primarily work in media studies. So one class that I teach just this past spring is called Feminist Media Studies, and I also always teach a class called, it used to be called Women in Literature, and then we just changed it to Gender and Power in Literature. So I still do a lot of literature in terms of in my instruction, but my publishing has been more media studies-ish, as you can see with Fatal Attraction. And my new book, A Feminist Guide to Marriage, I'm calling part feminist history, part memoir, and part manifesto. So, so that's where I am. Thank you for asking that. But now I want to hear from you. So I think what we're going to do is go around the room, and again, we're fortunate to have a really full room. So I'm going to ask that you just share one Simmons memory, and then one idea of something you'd like to see sort of addressed today. And this will help me to know kind of how to steer the conversation when we get to the more group discussion portion. Okay, and I'm going to start over here. Is that okay? And if you could say your name, because I obviously don't know you.
I'm Marilyn Fraser Johnson. And I think one of my fondest memories was going to England with the Simmons College Chorale.
And anything you'd like to talk about today?
I wasn't sure what this meeting was about. I'm up with that, yeah.
That's okay.
My name is Lucia Lopresti. And what was the first
Favorite memory.
A Simmons memory. Oh, my favorite memory. My nursing class, we were very close, and tea in the dorms. And I'd like to keep Simmons the way it was. I like the Simmons College, I think, and the camaraderie we had, and the empowering women, which I think you still do.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Thank you. Yes.
I'm Mel Herman. My fondest memories are from my friends from Gibbs Hall in the dorm, living in the dorm, which I really did like. And I think a lot of us are nervous about all the changes. And, I just would miss the walk, the walk over here.
Oh, so the new building.
Yeah, where you just kind of process what the day is going to be.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
I'm Deidre Griebert Dean, and I'm also a Dix Hall chick. And I would, if I was to be truthful, and I didn't go on the tour previous to this because I'm not walking too well right now, so I just sat out in the sunshine, and as I was contemplating, I realized that my best, most meaningful college experience was not academic. I majored in elementary education. I had wonderful teachers, but my most significant growth grew in friendships, learning how to live, and I saw a big separation between, as Mel was talking about, the walk over, it was like going through a portal, and so there was, to me, there was a very definite separation. The heart was at the residence campus. The head was here, and they didn't always mix particularly well. Although I had very kind professors. Senora Cohen let me do my Spanish final in English. I willingly admit that. I think she was a saint. But she thought I could read Spanish like a goddess, and I didn't understand a word of what I was reading. She was okay with passing. Raised to pass fail. So as I was sitting there, and I'm contemplating this another giant tall building, and not having access to the old residents, I consider that to be a loss to some potential growth.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gosh, I won't say that much. Same class, and we met in Dix Hall. Memories, oh gosh, I suppose it was, friends.
Mhm.
And I did physical therapy in the end. And all the, going actually and looking at the labs, I thought, oh my goodness, I did all that stuff. A huge memory was doing the dissection in the Harvard Medical School in summer with no air conditioning. What else did you want to know?
When you want to see change.
I know, I don't know.
It was also just what we wanted to talk about today.
Right, yeah.
So it doesn't have to be. That's fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm Mary Ellen Duffy, also a Dix Hall chick here. And sort of memories, I think this is similar, the friendships from Dix Hall, I think one of the things though is you talked about specifically academic, but I also remember the biology department being, we were fairly social on Friday afternoons, if I remember.
Ann Coughlin had the model.
Yeah. So the Friday afternoon socials at the biology department were one of fun memories. I want to see change as someone who, walked in the original Women's March at DC and who did New York the next year, just said like, really? I mean, these changes are just concerning. That's so anyway.
All right, Mary Sweeney, another Dix chick.
Say that.
We need t-shirts now.
So I have to say, it's like, my honest memory really is sort of late night in dorm rooms and just like this traveling group from one room to another, and we just
Sitting in the hallway.
Yes, that's true.
We did do a lot of sitting in the hall.
Yeah.
So in terms of today, I mean, I am interested in hearing your perspective as a scholar on this and sort of, I guess I feel like we were kind of living it, so I'm not sure like in the moment that I really was like focusing on some of these changes, so yeah.
I'm Chris Cambria. I was also part of the Dix Hall gang, and definitely my favorite memory, and I think a very important part of my growing up learning process was living with all these friends and learning. I was a PT major also, and really enjoyed working with Ann Coughlin, and actually came back here to teach a couple of years for her. So yeah, I'm just curious as to all the new changes as well for today.
Sure. Thank you. I can just that.
I'm Chris McElroy, and kind of my memory in kind of keeping with what you're talking about, the memory came back is that we started as a women's center here at the college in 1974, and it was so my introduction to feminism. And I remember Phyllis Cheslin, who wrote Women in Madness, came to speak, And she said, every family needs a wife, it just doesn't have to be a woman. My guiding, oh my God.
I'm so glad you said that. Thank you. I have to say, I was sharing with Marjorie and Michelle beforehand, but doing this research, it has made me even more fall in love with Simmons. I didn't know I could fall more in love with Simmons, but it made me realize that there is such a trove of history, and there is a story that needs to be told about this institution and this institution's history, and all of you. So I'm committed to telling it in some kind of way. So, but I don't want to make this about me. I want to go back to you.
I'm done.
I'm Nancy Lazier. Again, my favorite memory, my friends in the dorm, and my wish for today is you will give us some hope for women in the future.
Hi, I'm Mary Angela Davis. I was Mary Angela Fellows in college. And I remember some wonderful classes. I had some art classes with Professor Oppenheim, and I remember setting up to draw outside, plein air drawing, and also I took a lot of art history and loved going to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum.
Yeah, Emily Kramer Olson, I was class of 72. What wasn't there to remember about Simmons? It was just a fantastic experience. I was a very shy, quiet person who was not doing what I wanted to be. I was doing what others expected of me. And this place gave me the courage and the ability to become me. And that was huge. My mother really wanted me to become a librarian, and why not go to Simmons to be a librarian? And that was never on my plate. I always wanted a science, and I did not leave here in the sciences, but the professors here were so supportive and so collaborative and worked with me to find a career and a life. And I will never forget the many kind, wonderful professors here. Besides what they could teach me was what they empowered me. And I'd like to hear today about empowerment, especially going forward as we're looking at Handmaid's Tale, et cetera. It's terrifying. Yeah.
I'll.
Yeah, okay.
My name is Julie Mason. I was Arnold Hall. We have another club here. I think the dorm life, I remember the most. But other than that, I think it was the spirit of change and revolution that we were doing. And I have a daughter who's just I try to explain the history, and she just, but anyway, she didn't get it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's at the time we were here.
That's right.
That's what
They've
it was.
always had it,
Yeah.
but it came from us.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kathy Simon Snyder. I was a commuter, and my favorite time was just hanging out with all my commuter friends down in the basement of this building in the cafeteria. It's so much different now, so much more open. And, just remembering that you said the great professors and the empowerment, and, I went on to have a good career, and my daughters followed with their careers. So they think it's so easy, but they don't understand what things were going on when we were coming up. So, the big abortion issue is I can't believe it's come back.
I'm Roberta Gerson, and the things that I remember are that Simmons was such a nurturing and nourishing experience for me, just being around fantastic women, and the professors here were phenomenal, and I have some very warm memories of, I majored in both math and economics, and I remember the great professors I had in both disciplines. And when I came here, I wanted to be a high school math teacher, and I think when I took my first macroeconomics course from Barbara Sartell, it made me change my major immediately. I also remember dorm life particularly playing parts and listening to Carole King and James Exactly. I'm excited about the change of the residence hall to here. I'm not a big fan of change, but I feel that oftentimes change is necessary. And I personally will miss that people coming after me will miss that experience of being in a separate residence hall location. But I understand why Simmons undertook this. And I was also saddened by what I heard from this morning at the brunch about our financial situation and other things. And I feel an obligation, if you will, to do more with my Simmons connection. And I'm also, like all of us, concerned about what's going on in the greater world in terms of women's rights and how a number of things have seeming to go back in time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Susan Luther, and I grew up in a rural town, transferred in sophomore year to Arnold Hall. Wonderful friends. And so I think the city of Boston was what was the eye opener for me and gave me the kind of look at the bigger world, even though it is a small city. Academically, I was an education major, home economics, which in my junior year, that kind of went away and we transitioned to nutrition. But I never really stayed in teaching, so I think the confidence that I learned here let me go out and create and make things up as I went along for my whole career. I think what I'm most interested in knowing is whether Simmons is looking at or has looked at entrepreneurial management and creating a program that allows women to leave college and create a business immediately on their own. I think that one of the reasons perhaps that we don't get the donors is because we don't have high income majors. And yes, you can go get an MBA, and not that people didn't eventually get to that, but if you want to foster high giving, you better have people with high incomes. And I think a lot of why things have dropped off is because we're all busy putting kids through college. And there's, given where you live, there's only so much money, and it's easy to drop something off. So that's my major want to know is why aren't we getting women to create their own businesses as soon as they get out of college, and why aren't alumni helping them do that if they've already gotten to that point?
I'm Kathleen Sullivan, and I have so many fantastic and terrible memories about Simmons. But I think just to break up the mood, I'm going to tell this one. We worked on I think Julie was there with me on the library desk. Behind the library desk, as a job, we were supposed to sort the books. But one of the things that we learned was that Simmons Library had copies of the President's Commission, the report of the President's Commission on obscenity and pornography.
Really?
And people would come in.
I went to the library too.
People would come in and some of them would ask for the illustrated version. And there was an illustrated version. And I think Julie, I'm just telling because Julie's sitting there, I think she said, come back, I'll show it to you. I could not believe it. I thought, what am I looking at? And these pictures, I had no idea. So I went from totally naive to way over too much information. So that was exciting to be a librarian.
Wonderful.
You should go to lunch.
Judy Stokie, also from Arnold Hall. I'll make it brief because I'm concerned that we have time to hear from Suzanne. And I can't give you just one experience. I think people have mentioned many things. It's probably the stories, like stories that I really enjoyed. And I always felt like there was always more to do, especially academically. I never felt limited. And I think that really helped in my later life. So for today, I'd really like to focus on, given how crazy things are, I have a high level of anxiety, but what can we do constructively to keep things going in a positive direction?
Maureen Sable-Ecker, also from Arnold, and I liked what you said about the residence campus being the heart and this being the head. One of the things I liked best about Simmons was that it was in the middle of the city. The city was very accessible. You could walk pretty much anywhere you wanted to go, which I did. And I felt like when you came to class, you were going to school in the city, but then you had a really nice place to go where you felt safe. I remember sitting out in the green space, many, many times. The Friday afternoon teas I thought were awesome. And I think Judy just said what I am thinking too. I'm very concerned about the state of our country. The setbacks for women are crazy. I'm equally as concerned that our children don't know how to go about affecting change. I feel like we did it. We did it in a number of ways. And actually, right before our year, it was like a little more dramatic when the changes in like dorm life were such that, men weren't allowed in the dorms and you only had like, parietals or something, whatever that means. And you were kind of really sheltered. And then the generation just before us was the one that sat in on the college administration and affected, real change. But I feel like the young people have to really take control of this. And I'm not sure how to participate at this point in a meaningful way. And I would like to hear thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Connie Zellin Herrera, and I am just floored by all of these wonderful stories and memories. I was in Evans Hall, it was the quiet school, the quiet. But I think what was most wonderful were those nights we would just sit up all night talking and learning about the world. And I'm actually from the class of 72. So one year my classes were canceled at the end of the year because of all the sit-ins and what of that. So it was a pretty tumultuous time. And I'm really glad to have been here at Simmons during that time because the women's movement I felt like started here. So those are great memories. In the academic side, I was a Putty publications major and I love the hands-on work. So I'm back here this year because I'm so curious to know where Simmons is going and how my support, because my support has been all along, but I didn't know where the future was for Simmons. So that's why I'm here.
So I'm another interloper, Paula Lynch Keough, but my sister's class of 74. So that shows some confidence in Simmons, especially since we both had daughters that later attended. Yeah, class of 2000 and 2004, yes. And, echoing some of the things that Connie mentioned, being class of 70, I mean, it was Kent State. It was marches against the Vietnam War down to Boston Common. It was the sit-in in the president's office and the Black Students or BSO, Black Students Organization being founded. And I think Paula Sneed is here. And I remember, I think she was the first president of BSO. And I remember congratulating her when she then went from being president of BSO and sitting in the president's office and then taking over president's office on a corporate level. I think that certainly shows Simmons' leadership. But, also during that time, again, relating to what's happening now with the demonstrations, with the, rights of minorities and various, gender identifiers and so forth, and where is all that going? And thinking too, One of the speakers we had on campus was Bill Baird, and I don't know if people remember him, but he was an advocate for birth control. And it was kind of illegal then to even talk about birth control. And I think before he came to speak to us, he had been arrested at Boston University. So it was a big deal. And I was covering it for the Simmons News. So, you know, it's sort of like you relate things that you experienced in the past with things that are happening in the future or happening now and wondering where's the future going.
Thank you. Yeah, June Lynch Black, Smith Hall, and just carrying on some of what our last two speakers had said. I remember being in an organizing group with students from all the different Boston universities to organize the march or one of the marches for the Vietnam War down to Boston Common. And I just said, I don't want to be standing out front because I don't want my father to see me. I think that's worried. And he worked in downtown Boston, so I didn't want to let him do. But you know, it was a wonderful way to affect change. And I'm just hoping that Simmons students today are getting involved in things like that with their, you know, peers in other schools, because we really had a nice thing going, you know, we're all working together with all the different colleges. And then senior year, I moved to Evans, and we weren't so quiet, at least on this fourth floor, the seniors and singles, particularly on Hell Night. That was one of my vivid memories, because the sophomores went around and we're like breaking eggs on seniors' heads and making them march to Star Market, and then going into our rooms and putting cornstarch and peanut butter all over our mirrors. And so we were coming in. One of my classmates on the fourth floor, we had sophomores on the second one, saw like a dozen eggs downstairs. And so we stole their eggs, so they couldn't use it on us. And then we heard them coming. We all went into one room on the fourth floor. We could hear them coming, but we had a little ledge outside of the room. So we would go out the window and move. So when they went in the room, nobody was there. And then we made mud balls with a dead plant. And so we kind of call it seniors' revenge. But anyway, I'd like to see, I hope there's some green space when they do move the resident campus.
Oh, yes. All of that staying. I mean, none of this will change. They've driven all the piles for the new building. So there will be a new building in that space, but everything's will, as you see it right now. Thank you.
I'll pass.
Okay.
Carol.
I think a memory for me, I'm inspired by everything I've heard thus far and trying to think as I'm taking notes about everything I've heard thus far. And I guess for me, Simmons is what's going on now. And I never read the whole book, but Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. And I feel like that sort of sums up my Simmons experiences. And I'm thinking, being a Black 18-year-old from a 99% Black high school, coming to a predominantly white institution, and what that meant for me. And I came with my twin sister and 3 other classmates from our high school. So I wasn't alone, so to speak. But everything about Simmons was becoming and learning. And I learned in the classroom. I learned in the dorm. I learned from my roommates. Rahema was one of them. And I was struck by the fact that she listened to white music. Like she introduced me to Lauren Nero. I mean, I'm saying goes both ways. Freshman, I didn't know there were Black people in Iowa. And there was a Black student that learned the choir from Iowa. I said, damn, I didn't know that. And so Simmons was all about learning, and I learned legal stuff and illegal stuff. And how to manage that. And I was trying to think of, to sum it up, just one favorite memory, and I don't know if Rahema I've ever talked about this before. But we took a darkroom photography. Rahema was in communications, she'll tell her own story, but we took a photography class together. And we thought the professor was an old battle axe. You know her. I'm now an old battle axe, but so I sat here today thinking about that class and how to sum up my Simmons experience, and it was the darkroom experience. It was putting in a blank piece of paper and seeing a picture evolve. Wow. And I'm not one for metaphors or any of that, but I was thinking about Simmons and experiences. So I'm going back to the dark room. Hey, I don't know.
Thank you so much. We're gonna go to the back, in blue, if that's okay? Yes.
I was just getting a word about a bad storm in Dallas. I'm glad I'm here. Hi, I'm Deborah Payton-Levy, Debbie Payton-Levy from Dallas now, and I'm from Arnold. And oh boy, I have so many, I have very contrasting memories. One was seeing Shirley Chisholm. I was so inspired by that.
Yeah.
And a contrasting memory is panty raids. Wentworth. So we were really struggling. Yes, and we'd hang out our panties. I still can't believe we did it. So that was very contrasting.
I remember dating
that. So it's very contrasting. The other thing is, I think as an example, listening to you all, is what, quiet over there, is how impressed I was by all my fellow students. I mean, all our classes, it just was so impressive. So I was very affected by that. I gained a lot of confidence from my friends, from my classes, and from my professors. So, and I'd like to hear a little more about the history of how you might see why is this going down? Yeah, so that's what I'm interested in.
Thank you so much.
I'm Karen Superior Kafka, also Arnold Hall. I guess my fondest memories is in the smoker. Just getting together and exchanging ideas freely, especially in such a tumultuous time. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much.
I'm Diane Miller, also Arnold Hall, class of 74. I came from a hick town in Rhode Island, and so this was a real eye-opener, and I felt like when I came here, I found my voice, which, you know, has continued on with all the chapters in my, you know, the past 50 years. What I find so interesting is now, you know, we're communicating, and, you know, when I go to Starbucks or Panera or wherever, or even most restaurants, you know, you look around and nobody's communicating. They're just looking at their phones and looking down. And I think that's a sad statement. And I just wonder how we get back to better communicating with our peers, and, you know, how we train the next generation, you know, to put these down. Of course, I'm holding mine. Just in case.
I'm Carol Rubin Brown, class of 74. Arnold Hall was everything. I mean, we were there, we were different, we met each other, and things never changed. And 50 years later, you might not be in touch with these women. Maybe some, not for the last 5 years. You come back here, nothing has changed. The voices are the same. You recognize a style, you recognize, I don't know, it's just a beautiful thing. I too was thinking, in 4 years, we went from freaking panty raids, which I didn't even want to say. Panty raids and parietals. You couldn't even let your father up the stairs to help with your luggage or something unless you signed went down and signed him in and brought him up.
Right.
But in 4 years, we had speakers on birth control. We were marching against the war. Everything changed in 4 years. Our style, our clothing style, our ability to at least act on the things that we believed in. We found voices. We found separate voices. We found common voices. And I can't believe 50 years later, and most of us have daughters, most of the women in our group. And I'm afraid they take things for granted. I'm afraid they don't understand the rights that always were theirs. You know, how quickly something can change. It was a big 4 years in general in this world, I think, that span of time.
Thank you so much.
Judy.
Oh, yes.
The other Judy. The stripes. Oh, okay. Judy Schlesinger, Arnold Hall also. And, of course, the lifelong friendships with all the women I've met here and a few from some other dorms as well. And, the encouragement from professors to do more and to do better. That was wonderful. And also it was a time when we thought we could do everything and we can get out there and we can affect change. And so my question is now, how can Simmons in both courses and structure and outlook reinstill that in young women? Because we have to stand up and raise our voices. And it is not easy now. And we need to do it both academically, learn academically in the classroom and socially, and to have this be a continued discussion throughout their 4 years. So I want to know what we're planning to do.
Thank you. I do have some answers for all of you. This is so helpful.
Hi, what do I want to say? I think for Simmons, I agree with Barbara Walker. So I agree with many people here. I have to say, maybe when 2019, when we heard about the big change, and I was like, upset, sort of appalled, whatever. And now I'm totally accepting. Some of the stuff you just have to go along with, and if it's part of the survival, that trumps it. In terms of my experience, great experience. I found many, many lovely women. One thing I really felt was there weren't cliques. I come out of a high school, which was incredibly preppy. And boy, if you didn't belong, you didn't belong. So that you could float between different groups. I mean, obviously there were groups of, different amoebas. Arnold and Dick's. I think, like Judy said, it's important to be enabling the students here on how to promote change. I need to know what to do because I am totally, I've been stressed now since 2015. So my other experience that I really, really regret, and this is partly because of my naivete and my being just a young kid, is I came in and I was in Music Hall. And Music, correct me if I'm wrong, there were a good number of the Black women who had come in that were in Music. Yep. There was nothing, as far as I remember, that
coming from Simmons on how possibly, this is in the middle of the Black Power and everything going on. So it's not as though everybody was like, oh, hi, Cheery, good to see you, you know, whatever. I think me being white and young and an idiot needed help on how to facilitate communication and whatnot. And it was just never there. Now I wish I could redo it all. I mean, but it was still, it felt like I was isolated just because I was on the first floor of MISIC. There was another group, lovely women, but I just never had the opportunity to get to know at the time.
Where do you live now?
In the Berkshires.
Let's all go visit.
The Berkshires are lovely, but really so solidly white.
Okay. I work with white.
Yeah, I know. It's not like that. You can film us.
I'm so serious. That's good. Carol, like somebody said, this whole thing of diversity and understanding one another, it worked both ways. Black people feeling very isolated. I went to a all-white high school out in Wellesley. I was one of only two Black kids in that school. And when I came here and to Simmons, I gravitated towards the Black students here. And Morse Hall, let me give a shout out for Morse Hall. And Morse Hall had it going on too, like Arnold and Evans and other places. What a wonderful, wonderful time I had at this college. Like all of you, it was that for me. And I have told so many people about this experience of coming into my own. I was very introverted as a high school student. Even though I was vice president of student council, I did plays. I was the singer in school, but I was still very introverted. And this place brought me into figuring out a different way to use my voice. I've always used my voice, but a different way of using my voice, because this is where I decided I was going to become a journalist. And that's not how I started when I came here. I thought I was going to do something around sociology. And I'm doing something around sociology, but in a different way from being a sociologist. And Simmons helped me with that. Simmons also gave me, and I want to cry when I think about this, but one of the best friends of my life. And that's her over And one of the good people in my life, and that is Lynn White, who sits right here. And Lynn White will tell you about this little Black book that she put together. That was Lynn White, this woman right here. And I was so proud of you when I thought of, we think of the little Black book, and you think, I got some secret names in here, I'm gonna go, this friend. But it was about us. And that was Lynn's idea, and it was Lynn's creation. It was one of the other things that made me, seeing you do that, made me think of what I could do in the world of communication and being a part of what the world is all about. So this place, like many of you, I cringe a little bit thinking of how we are changing. But this place has always changed. This place started out with one building on the corner, and it grew. And it's growing now, like Carol said, in a different way. But one of the things I think is so important, and I was so glad we had that meeting with the president. I shut up a minute because everybody finishes themselves. But it's about participation. The fact that we only have 6.2% of philanthropy belongs. Doggone it. We need to do something. Even if we do a little something, we'll bring it up to more than 6.2%, right? And if we sit here and talk about the love that we have and the appreciation we have for this place, we need to manifest that, not just simply with sharing the wonderful stories that we have for one another and appreciation we have for one another, but show that in the appreciation for this institution that gave us something that made our lives richer and fuller. And we can do that by being involved, not just every Jubilee. This will be the only basis. I meant that in the sense of the students now.
There is that afterlife.
But I'm glad to be here, and I'm just loving all the stories that I'm hearing from each one of you, because it echoes my feeling about life at Simmons and what this institution was able to give to me and what it's given to all of us.
In person, I was a biology major. I was talked out of being a medical technologist by my advisor freshman year, and went for a 35-year career as an optometrist. And I mean, I have lots of friends and remember everything, Arnold Hall, but I came in, as people said, naive. And I thought women's, I was inspired by the women's movement. It was the beginning of the women's movement. I've been married, most of the time, never changed my name. I just, it was hard me. And I've been depressed, with we had all the things we've gotten, all the things we achieved back then, and everything is just gone. And I don't know, no matter how fabulous Simmons is, I don't know what we can do about it. And that's sort of what I'd like to hear about. Is there anything?
And everybody better vote.
Yeah. Oh, right. I have a daughter in Florida.
Don't vote if you're not voting correctly.
That is a vote.
You'll tell us later what's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And don't worry, I think we can go a little longer, if there's interest, so.
You don't want to get.
I'm Donna Wilson.
Yeah.
My memory of Simmons is how comfortable I felt in class speaking up. I'd spent my first 2 years, and happy ones, but in classes in a co-ed university where I didn't always feel that comfort. So that was important to me. And I guess I want to know, what's the role of women's colleges, hearing that there are so few of them, in turning back this tide, all the things that we earned and now we're losing.
I'm Lynn White, and I was one of those Black women or girls at the time in music hall. And I'm sorry. Or made you feel isolated.
Nothing personal.
Yeah. Nothing ever is, right? Like Rahema, I came from Montclair, New Jersey. I lived in a neighborhood that was mostly white. I was surrounded by friends who were white, and some would chase me home from school and call me burnt toast and nigger. And I came here and found a home with the African-American students on campus who had the same shared childhood experiences of being ostracized because of the color of our skin. And I was active in the BSO movement here. For a senior project, I created this book called The Little Black Book, which was an evaluation from each of the Black students who were graduating at the time, what their aspirations were and what it meant to be so. And that book continues every year. It's so classic. And I went on also to become a journalist. And one of my earlier jobs was in St. Louis. And I remember covering Phyllis Schlafly, the whole ERA movement, not the church, not the state. Women will decide their fate. And we are full circle going backwards. And what I'm feeling and seeing in this room is, well, we had our BSO, and this was our group, our little club, because we did feel isolated to some extent because we just didn't feel like we were assimilating. We're all alike. We were all fighters for the greater good. We're all revolutionaries here. We had that shared experience then, right? And we continue to have it now because we are embattled now as we were then. And I feel like there is something we can do. It is voting, yes, but continue to let your voices be heard in your church, in your synagogue, in your school, with your kids, keep telling the stories of where we started, because they are forgotten in this generation. And if they continue to be forgotten, we will be forgotten as women and empowered women. And we will be living those horrifying days. We don't want to do that. So I just thank you for, asking about us and allowing us to tell our stories, because I've just grown so much richer in knowing that we are one. We have the same common goals, experiences, and we're also lucky that we found each other as that.
Yes.
And I guess from you, I just want to hear where you feel we're going as a collective.
This has been I've been taking copious notes. I have a lot to say. Yes.
Hi, I'm Pamela Curtis. I was in MESIC. I came in as a sophomore. And one of my favorite memories was also a Simmons Chorale trip to England. But also a big part of what Simmons meant for me was kind of affirming my feminist heart, which I had just been on a journey of discovery, and got really solid in that here. And it really stood me in good stead, because I ended up in information technology in a very male-dominated kind of work. And so Simmons was really great preparation for that. And one of the things that somebody said this morning about capturing data, and it's partly the stories of, I think that there would be a lot of great things that could be mined from our experiences. Like somebody said something about, well, what about leadership? Well, I mean, I was a manager and I ended up my career as a vice president in a startup. And, I think we have things that we could share that might be helpful in Simmons' own understanding of what Simmons has produced in its graduates. I totally agree.
I'm Connie Patron. I too am an Arnold girl. And the memory that I keep sort of bouncing around in my head is not so much fond or it's a transformative memory. And the memory is when I first came, I think I was a freshman, and I had a women in history class. And even the concept of women in history was like, what? And it was remarkable. And the final paper is my make me cry. The final paper was to really talk about a woman that you admired, respected, and to sort of analyze her life and contributions. And I chose Jane Addams, later became a social worker. And in the paper, I refer to Jane Addams as Jane. And the professor circles the Jane and says, would you call Ms. Addams Jane if you're a man? And it was one of those, remember Ms. Magazine in the backyard had Snap or whatever it was? It was one of those like snap moments where, shoot, she was absolutely right. There was no way. And what can I say? Transformative. The importance of self-reflection, the importance of being open to what others have to give you, because you can't do it on your own. What would I wish for? I fear for our younger generation. With some of the folks, and I hang out on university campuses a bit, I hear nihilism. I hear not believing in anything. And it breaks my heart.
I'm Dawn Enos Clark. I grew up in the metropolis of Warwick, Rhode Island. Yeah, Warwick. That's one word. And I also grew up with two brothers. and spent most of my formative years lamenting the fact that I did not have a sister. Not pleased about that. And then I landed in Dix Hall and found my sisters for life. I'm mostly interested now in what you have to say. I feel like it's time. So I'm wrapping it up.
Okay, I'm last. Okay, first of all, this is the best therapy session I've ever been in. So, and I agree with almost everything I've heard in this room. Simmons gave me the start of my career, my life. I can't say enough. So I'm gonna finish with a funny story, but before I start, I had the same battle axe photography teacher that you know, I'm gonna, because I got kind of weepy at some of your stories. I felt myself on the urge, so I'm gonna stop with something funny. My mother went to Simmons. She was the class of 1943. It was the war years.
Wow.
You know, I have pictures of her in men's uniforms and hats, and it was a very different. So, you know, and it was the 60s, 70s, it was the war years again. And father didn't want me to go to a school where everybody was crazy. You know, we had to go to a safe, and my mother goes, "Oh, my school's fine." Okay, so okay, here's the crux of the deal. In those days, you really didn't go visiting schools. You kind of went when you got accepted and say, okay, I want to go. So my mother decides we're going to do a road trip. And we do a road trip to Simmons. And first of all, she's, oh, I know Boston. No. I was lost everywhere. We finally show up at Simmons Hall on the corner, and there's a red fist hanging down. And my mother, in her own inimitable way, said, isn't that nice? The girls are cheering for the Red Sox. But you know, I said, no, Mom, that isn't what that means. She went, huh? Okay. The second part is we arrive the first day. Now, again, different generations. My mother decided that I was going to wear pantsuits to class. Do you remember that? I haven't had one since. And my sister was starting practice teaching in the school system. So my mother stayed a little late. And as soon as all the parents left, everybody changed into their jeans and sneakers and their painter's pants. And she looked at me, she goes, you're not gonna wear those, are you? But again, I think, again, I agree with everything I've heard. There isn't anything I haven't agreed with that I've heard. And by the way, I was in Smith and Evans with June, yes, freshman year. Oh, and my mother lived in the same dorm. She'd been in Evans as well, so she knew that too. All of us in Evans.
I was in, and my daughter too.
Yeah, okay. So there's a history there. I am very sad about the residence campus going. I understand it. I'm a financial person. I'm a politician. I get it. But it still makes me sad. So it makes me really sad because it's where we went, you know, it's our home. But I would caution all of us to, not caution, but think about that story of me and my mother with the red fist. Okay, and how different it was. You know, we've always gone through these generational shifts, but we find our way back home. And I think for us, we need to find our way back home and influence others to find our way back. And I'm just gonna end on that. Oh, yes, that's right.
I feel like every one of you is standing up here right now, not me. But I just want to actually echo really, because I wrote down something far less eloquent than some Lynn, right? Lynn said that we need to tell these stories, right? And Lynn also said, we are the revolutionaries. And I want you to all say that to yourself. I mean, you don't have to say it out loud, but like, you are the revolutionaries, and you still are. And I think we need to be really, like, this has been transformative for me, just listening to all of your stories. And I think that you need to tell these stories and don't care if anybody listens. Keep telling these stories. Really good. Truly, when you all talked about sort of how therapeutic it was so moving to me to hear just the love and the care in your voices, but also the passion and in some cases the anger. So what I'm going to show you is sort of like where you all were when you were here at Timmons in terms of what was going on. And a lot of the things that are on my slide deck you've actually mentioned in one way or another. So I want you to remember where you were and where you got to. And frankly, we need that energy back, right? The world is in dire straits, as you all know, and I think we're all really petrified and also somewhat paralyzed in the face of that. But what you all were facing in the 1960s and the 1970s, it's akin to what's happening now too, right? You fought and you talked and you marched and you told your stories and you resisted authority and power that was wrong, right? And I think that the knowledge and just the history in this room and all of your expertise, I think we can lead the next generation, but you're still here, right? You all, this is your history. And I was been saying this, I spent, the past couple of days going through these archives of your time at Simmons. And I am so convinced that this is a story that needs to be told, not just for Simmons, but there is something really important about the fact that this is a women-centered campus. This is a women's college. Call it a college or call it a university. I can also tell you that our students here today, they feel that same commitment to women's voices. The student newspaper is now called The Voice, right? And so that notion that students are sort of apathetic or nihilistic, I think is really true on sort of a broad swath, but not Simmons students, right? Listening to all of you, I could think of, if I filled a room with my current students, they would sound like you. They would talk about their, with graduating seniors, they would talk about their friendships. They would talk about, their classes. They would talk about, going to be women in science or going into fields where women weren't always welcome. They would talk about the fact that feminism continues to sort of be in the water around here, right? So we still are Simmons, but I do think it's so incumbent on all of you, right, to continue to tell your stories. So I'm going to tell you some of the things that you did. So basically, this is just literally sort of a snapshot. But anyway, in your first year, this was fascinating. Someone from the Black Panther Party was supposed to come and speak at Simmons to get people to go to the Revolutionary People's Constitutional Convention, which was happening on November 27th through November 29th, 1970. That person did not actually come to campus because they went to go see Bobby Seale across town. Eileen Fyers, who was at the time the president of the Student Coordinating Council, basically led a discussion about the importance of the Revolutionary People's Constitutional Convention, where it was said, and this is what floored me down, that at that convention, they were going to be talking about women's rights, they were going to be talking about civil rights and black rights, and they were also going to be talking about gay rights. And the fact, yes, the fact that and I think nowadays we actually think of those issues in silos, right? And it's funny because there's this buzzword in academia called intersectionality. And you're supposed to talk about, all of these different sort of points of identity, these kind of different locuses. So, it's one thing that I'm a woman, but I'm a white woman and I'm a fairly upper class woman, right? And that makes me very different from somebody else who might share my gender identity, who doesn't share my class identity or my sexual identity, right? Well, you were all so intersectional before anybody called it that, right? It wasn't just organizing for women, it was organizing for humanity and sort of human rights and dignity, right? Growing opposition reported in Vietnam, there was so much I found about the anti-war movement, right? And you all have talked about this a little bit too. I don't quite understand the title of this. Some of my best friends are women, but essentially this is the quote that I kind of pulled out. where it's the Simmons Socialist Women. And the idea that there were like socialists?
Yeah.
Did they know about that? So they're the socialists. Right? And so the socialists were basically saying dealing with institutions is a very important aspect of women's liberation. But there is also a great deal of emphasis placed on women's awareness of herself and the building of one-to-one interpersonal relationships. I want to just say to you, that's exactly what you all just did, right? That's exactly what you all just did, right? You worked on thinking about these one-to-one interpersonal relationships, and that is liberation, right? And that's why I'm saying, talk, just talk. You gotta tell your stories. You gotta talk to anybody who will listen. You have to make them listen, right? Because frankly, the like fate of this, not just this country, but this world. So I hope you are gleaning how inspired and actually humbled I have been through like the course of doing this research. So anyway, then I have just a still from Women's Power. This is the March on Washington. This is the March in New York City, the women's strike in August of 1970. So before you started.
Can I ask just a question? Where did you get these things? Are they in the archive?
Lauren, can you do like it's okay. I have to confess, I did not actually do this research. I got them all handed to me by Lauren's office.
But they exist.
So Simmons has a digital archives online.
Oh, cool.
Where you can look up all of your yearbooks, your course catalogs from the very beginning of Simmons. They spent some money and digitized all of this. So all of the newspapers, which it was the Janus at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Were the articles. And so Pat Donnelly, who's one of our interns, and myself started going through these and working with Michelle and Marjorie, who said, these are some issues, X, Y, Z, six things. And we just started looking through these articles and sent them off to Suzanne. And so we have them all. You just have to spend some time reading it. But it's just like reading the Michael speech.
Believe you me, if someone else doesn't do the work, I do. Like, I am figuring out like what Simmons.
You can do a documentary.
Well, it was. I knew, right? I knew that we were in the heart of it, but I had no idea, right? The level, every single social issue that was going on in this country at the time, you all were directly involved in, right? You were changing the world, right? And as I said, I was just humbled and awed and so grateful to be a part of this institution that has this legacy. And actually I have a story to tell you. Related to my next slide. Which is, right? Shirley Chisholm's visit to Simmons in 1972.
Yeah.
And there was actually another article that I didn't put up, but they were worried, a little bit worried, because they didn't know how many people were going to come, right, to see Shirley Chisholm when she came. Like, I think almost over 500 people came, right? And, and she said this, she said, I am very different from everyone in the candidates running, very different. Only one segment of the population has gone after the president's office, white men. And with one exception in this country, President Barack Obama, that has not changed. Nope. Right? Yeah. That has not changed. Right? And it won't change in 4 years either, right? When you think about the election we had. So, so I was reading the fine print here literally, and there was a line about who actually brought Chisholm to campus. Now she was campaigning, so obviously somebody had to arrange it. It was a member of the Black student organization.
Yeah.
It was the women's organization, and it was a history professor. And I was attending a meeting a couple of days ago with some of my colleagues, and they were like, what does Simmons stand for? What do we, because I'm sure you all know this, you talk a lot about branding, right? What's your brand? And, in all honesty, we've been having time, and I know you know this, right? And trying to figure out how to attract women to a women's college. It's not an easy sell. Are we going to kind of double down on the sciences, right? For those reasons, the humanities, my disciplines, are imperiled around the country and around the world. And so they were, my colleagues were sort of lamenting that fact. And I said, no. I said, when Shirley Chisholm came to campus, right? These were the people who brought her. I said, this is what Simmons is. And I feel really strongly that if we don't start to embrace that history and tell that story, then it's our fault too, right? As Simmons faculty members And I would really invoke you all as Simmons alums, right, to please tell the story. And yes, if you have any money to give us, please give us, help us. It really, it's the real deal, right? And I've always known that. I've been here for 18 years, but just doing this research helped me to see that hasn't just been the real deal for the 18 years that I've been here, right? We're celebrating our 125th anniversary, right? So this is a school that has a legacy of this kind of work, and just a lot to be proud of. Okay. Then I have, and you will know this, right? Just in the news when we were at Simmons, right? We went to the war demonstrations. U.S. women win abortion rights, right? The ERA, right? Which of course there's now talk about now they're trying to right? So a lot of states. Your final year at Simmons. Simmons opens a women's center. And the article actually talks about like, why would a women's college need a women's center? And then there's, and I just love this. The center will be a place where women can read, relax, and talk to other women. It will be useful for coordinating various academic, informational, and cultural activities. It'll also be a resource center. I mean, this is a bit of a women's center, right? Then with our, and our female guests as well. But I think you can see the importance of these spaces, right, where people come together. This is an article about how abortion services are now offered in Boston. I was fascinated what you all said about coming to speak about birth control, that was controversial. Again, I didn't know that. Like, that's stunning, right? And then I thought this was so interesting when you were all talking about the dorms and kind of the segregation of the dorms. The year that most of you graduated, Black and white women got together and talked all about this, right? And there's Black students calling, why isn't there a Black doctor in the infirmary, right? Why do we not have more Black professors? Why are these groups who do have so much in common, nevertheless continuing to be segregated, right? So obviously these problems have not been fixed. But the other thing that I took away from reading some of these articles is the way that you all named problems and dug into them, right? I mean, I'll be honest, we continue to have racial divisions on this campus, right? Things aren't perfect, but our students aren't necessarily at the point where they're like sitting down face to face and trying to work it out. And you all were. And that's what I don't mean to be Pollyanna about this, but you all are extraordinary. And the way you handled some of the world's toughest problems and made strides is so inspirational. So I just want to say, don't lose sight of that. Don't forget all the work that you've done, because God, the world needs you all more now than it needs something.
Although I feel compelled to say that I learned some things today that I didn't know. Some perspective on things, and Marjorie and I had met with Carol and with Rahema, but I appreciated everything that was said, which so explained the division that we lived through.
We didn't know.
And the reasons that it was so important.
So it's this is it's from your yearbook. It's just, and then in all honesty, I thought we were gonna have time for discussion questions, but but I I'll show you what they were. So we really don't have time. We've already gone 20 minutes past, so I think I will try to wrap this up as best I can, and just say that I heard you. I heard your sense of despair. I heard your sense of again, paralysis in some ways. But this is just sort of speaking for me personally. I also think it's really important to sort of remember the local, right, in your own communities. I mean, I joined the Winthrop School Committee about 3 years ago, and it was right around the time when there was all kinds of discussion about book banning, right? And like you couldn't have books about LGBTQ people in the libraries, and and this will come as no surprise to you. I'm an English professor in Boston, right? I feel pretty strongly about free expression and all of those things. And you know, to be honest with you, I go to a lot of boring meetings, like a lot of boring meetings, but like the sense of being involved in my community has been more enriching than I would have suspected, because I do feel like, you know what, because I take up a seat on that board, like, you know, I am making sure that we are, I mean, Winthrop is a pretty white town, to be honest. We are, you know, trying to make strides in terms of the diversity of books that our students are reading, right? We now have to like lobby the town for an override for this, to get more money for the school system. And as hard and taxing as all this is, you know, there's a lot of like the local, I know you all live in communities where there are local issues too. And so that's another way I think to combat a sense of paralysis, right? Because there's always that kind of work that needs to be done, right? So it doesn't, and some of you frankly are in power, in a lot of power. I know you have mouthpieces, right, to much larger constituencies. But work within the communities that you have and the outreach that you can do. And again, some people's pulpits in this room are bigger than others, but that's fine, right? You all have your part too. I hope you will consider Simmons sort of a partner and not just like a launch pad for you, which it sounds like it was, and I loved hearing all about that too. But I hope that Simmons is not just in your past, but also in your present and your future. You know, I can imagine inviting any one of you to come and speak to my classes or you know, or mentor my students about the professions that you're in and how you got to be there, or how you've done activist work in your life, or what have you, right? So please know that I hope that you're feeling more of a sense of community with Sims as well from this experience. And I'll just close by thanking you all. This has been extraordinary.
Thank you.